Welcome to the Business Podcast, where we interview professionals across all industries. Hey, it's Ayman. Welcome back. Today we have Amit Egan Datwani, founder and chief consultant at Global Consulting Organization. Amit, it's great to have you here with us today. How are you?
Fantastic, Ayman. Great to connect with you.
Absolutely. Maybe you can kick us off. Tell us a little bit about yourself and share something that most people might not know about you.
Sure. My name's Amit Egan Datwani. The last name I have is actually a hybrid of the last name I was born with, which is Datwani, and my wife's maiden name, actually, which is Egan. It's an Irish name, and my family comes from India. So started off there with a fun fact that most people actually don't know about me. A lot of people think Egan is my middle name, but it's not. I'm a founder and chief consultant of Global Consulting Organization. We're a project starting firm that's visioning, branding, and marketing the neighborhoods, communities, and cities of the future.
I definitely want to unpack that because it seems like there's a lot going on there. And before I was speaking earlier today, I saw your logo and I thought it was so cool because you have the G, C, and the O all encompassed. So I thought that was really cool. But maybe you can talk a little bit about how you got your start and then walk us into how you started your organization.
Sure. So it was definitely a long, windy road with a lot of twists and turns and a never-ending roller coaster ride. It started in 2009 when I was working in the clothing industry. At the time, I was running a women's and men's casual sportswear company. The universe definitely had other things in mind for me. And unfortunately, during the economic crisis, I had to shut down those companies. Very, very stressful experience. It actually took place 1 month after my wife and I got married. So not exactly the most appropriate time and the best way to start a marriage, but certainly a lot of lessons learned along the way. And thankfully, my wife and I were still together, and we definitely had a very, very strong stress test right in the beginning of our marriage. So fast forward over a period of approximately 11 years, I got into real estate, worked as a broker in the real estate industry in New York City, also worked in a family real estate company to learn the ropes because I really didn't know too much about the industry. In 2014, the entrepreneurial bug was definitely kicking, and I decided to start my own consulting company. Started working with some high net worth individuals and families, simply brokering transactions in the New York City area. And over a period of past 4 or 5 years, started traveling down to South Florida to visit my wife's family. And as I was building my startup, I found myself working in my mom-in-law's living room on deals in New York City. And it definitely didn't take too long for me to realize that there was something wrong with the picture, in the sense I was in beautiful, sunny South Florida and working on deals in New York City. So long story short, got my broker's license in Florida, started cold calling brokerage companies in Florida, and found one that I worked with for a little bit of time to kind of learn the ropes down here. Started building up a network, started building up a pipeline of deals. And what that turned into was turning into a consultant and an intermediary for clients who have capital in New York that were looking to deploy it in the South Florida market. About 3 years elapsed where I was traveling back and forth. It started every 2 months, became every 6 weeks, became every 4 weeks. And then during the pandemic, in 2020 became every 2 weeks. So it got to the point where it was just way too taxing. And we decided as a family to move down to South Florida. So in March of this year, we relocated to Boca Raton. which I call one of the most ultimate 15-minute cities in the country. Everything is so convenient. We can really get to about 80% of our lifestyle needs within 15 minutes. And we absolutely love it down here. So been working now as a consultant to developers and investment funds. What we're doing is we're starting a new niche in the real estate development cycle called project starting. As most people in the real estate industry know, we have project managers, project financiers, and project developers. We're creating a whole new niche called project starting that's focused on the initial stages of the real estate development cycle. And what we do is we bring what we call a unified creative vision to the initial stage of the real estate development cycle to help really center it and provide it with the right energy that's needed to start the real estate development process.
You know, when you talk about that, it begs a question. How did you find time going back and forth week to week or week on week during the pandemic to have a good life balance? So maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
Sure. And I don't think balance is the right word because at times, especially in building the startup, it was definitely unbalanced. And I'm okay with that. My family has gotten used to this idea of we don't really go after balance. I call the approach more of a process of integration where everything kind of integrates as one. Especially during the day, I built my practice working from home. So I intentionally did that starting in 2015. I have a son who at the time was 4 years old. So I definitely wanted to be home to see him growing up. And then, of course, being able to see him coming home from school was a very key aspect and a very grounding part of our routine on a day-to-day basis. So I've been able to maintain that. Now, when I threw in the travel, I mean, the way I did it was I strategized by taking flights on Tuesdays and coming down for 2 to 3 days. I would come down, let's say, once a month or once every 2 weeks, and I would strategize and pack my schedule where I was meeting with people, ideally in the same place. Many of my colleagues were very accommodating, knowing that I was in town only for 2 days. So I would meet them in a central point in Miami, for example. If I had to spread out, I would try to keep my meetings condensed within 10 to 15 minutes of each other. And in terms of maintaining balance, I have a daily practice that I use to stay sane, essentially. I meditate almost 45 minutes a day. I practice yoga. During the pandemic, I was probably practicing 30 to 60 minutes a day. And then also I work out either cardio or weights every single day. And I average about 6 hours of sleep, which right now is perfect for me. So I get 18 hours in a day to really play around. And this has come, after many, many years of fine tuning. It's definitely been a lot of trial and error. It's definitely been a lot of making mistakes and then kind of figuring out what works best, not only for me, but what works best with my family. And we've kind of have a nice routine that we've gotten down close to a science, but I hesitate to say that because it could easily change tomorrow.
Totally. And the reason why I asked that question is you talked about having moved to Boca Raton and that most of your needs are within 15 minutes. So it seemed like you like things to be within easy access. And that actually leads to another question around your concept of projects and project starting. So what really was the impetus for that?
Frustration. I was working as a broker, and I remember the summer of 2019, I was working on 12 off-market deals at the time, ranging anywhere from $8 million to $115 million. And I had sellers that were willing to sell. I had highly qualified buyers that were looking to acquire properties in the South Florida region. But I had a delta of 5 to 25% between what buyers were willing to pay and what sellers were willing to sell for. And it was so frustrating not to be able to transact. And the biggest part of my frustration was I could see the value in almost all of those deals that almost every one of those buyers was not seeing. And what it came down to was the clients that I was interacting with really looked at their decision-making based on a spreadsheet. And in the types of deals that I was bringing to the table, what it really required was vision. And at the time, the clients that I was working with, they did not seem to have the vision and the understanding for really what the future could be for each of those projects. So long story short, I went down this whole rabbit hole to figure out, thinking that there's got to be a better way for me to bring these projects to my clients and demonstrate the potential value that's inherently here that they did not seem to pick up on. So we created this process, which we now call the GCO system. And the GCO system involves three major components: visioning, branding, and marketing. And out of those 12 projects, I remember I approached one of my colleagues that I was working with on the deal. And I said, look, I've got this very unique way that I believe we can sell this project. This was a project that had not sold for 3 years. It was sitting in the off-market world, tremendous value there, but buyers were not able to see it. And of course, the seller was also overpriced at the time. So we came up with this process where we first got hired exclusively to market the property. We came up with a vision to create an experiential office building right in the heart of South Beach. This is in a neighborhood called South of Fifth, which is one of the wealthiest and I think one of the most exciting neighborhoods in all of Miami. And in line with that, we also developed a brand that we called the ultimate building for the 1%, to really cater to the top 1% that we felt were the right tenants for this building. In addition to that, we activated the entire project and the entire process by creating a very strong digital approach. We created a website. We hosted a party. We had a video of the party that we included in our marketing. We got some fantastic placement in The Real Deal, which is kind of like the Wall Street Journal of real estate, also in Forbes, and really worked hard in our public relations efforts to get this story out into the world. And a combination of all of these services really helped to generate some amazing results. We set a record for office space in the entire state of Florida, recording a rent of $92 a square foot with a private equity company out of New York. The ultimate price that was received by the owner was the asking price of $45 million in the middle of a pandemic. We generated 26 offers, had 153 capable buyers. And Ayman, this was all going on during a time when people were questioning the value of an office building. So obviously it was working. And then ultimately, last summer, the restaurant space was taken by none other than the famous Gordon Ramsay. He's bringing a concept called Lucky Cat and fell in love with the location. And ideally, I think he fell in love with the building. So we definitely did our job. And it was, I got to highlight again, during a year when people were questioning the value of an office building. We launched this project 2 weeks before COVID hit. We threw a fantastic launch party on the roof and had some great interest from the industry. And then all of a sudden the world shut down. So I highlighted to you kind of the results and the process that we had to activate. And we really had to scramble because the world shut down and we had to figure out how to do all of this digitally. So very interesting time, to say the least, to start a new platform. But it definitely made us sharper in our game and how we ultimately communicated everything that we did out to the world.
And you spoke a lot about concepts that, from a marketing point of view, make total sense to get the awareness out so that people can build curiosity and want to learn more about your product or service. What would you say was one of the most challenging aspects of that entire visioning, branding, marketing process?
Doing it in the middle of a pandemic and really convincing potential buyers about the vision for the future. I mean, it was so difficult, like painfully difficult. I remember those first few months after the world shut down, we were like, wow, what the hell do we do? Everything was based on creating this experiential office building. And here we are sitting in a world where people were afraid to even come to the office. Thank God it was in Miami, where the pandemic lasted for 2.5 months. And luckily we started doing some tours in June. But I can tell you, even then, I mean, people were just so hesitant and so scared. And I mean, talking to developers and owners literally who own portfolios of $500 million and more, like panicking. That was the reality. And selling an office building during that time was incredibly difficult. And then taking an office building and then bringing this new evolutionary approach to how to look at a vision for the future for an office, it was just a time when people were so fearful. And this entire platform that we're delivering relies upon people's ability to use their imagination. And in order for you to use your imagination, you have to have a lot of courage and conviction about the future. So the emotional aspect of fear was the dominant force throughout this entire process. And there's a reason why it took so long. Eventually, after we relaunched in June, the ultimate offer came in 7 months later. So prices for that building now, I believe, especially with Gordon Ramsay there, I think you're looking at a building probably that's 65 million now and above. So looking back on it, it's amazing to see actually how fast we were able to really pivot and then really deal with the reality of what the situation was, and then work hard to then, in that last 6 months of 2020, work hard to really communicate and talk to individuals that were so fearful, to think and go deep into their imagination and really think about what the possibilities were for that property in the future.
And when you think about the opportunities to do the same thing now as the world opens up, what areas excite you? Is it still South Florida? Are you entertaining other regions? What comes to mind when I ask that question?
So what we're focused on now, Ayman, is taking our platform that we've built and focusing now mainly as consultants, where we work with development companies and investment funds around the country to focus on that initial stage when they're just starting to formulate a plan and ideas for the future of their property. The initial project that we worked on was an office building, but that by no means is what our model is going to be built upon. We're really focused on projects that are oriented around the movement of live, work, play. So we're looking at dynamic projects that can bring all of those solutions to the marketplace and really are there to enhance the built environment. We're seeing a lot of interest now from our clients in figuring out what is the most seamless way to integrate their residential solutions with their retail, with their hotel, office, and public plaza. And what we're doing is that we're coming in to really help take their visions that they may have to the next level by bringing on architectural and engineering teams right from the beginning to provide ideas with what the property could look like in the future. We're then coming in and helping them to understand the importance of establishing a brand right from the beginning. That story of telling the brand and telling the importance of the brand and talking about the brand right from day one is so integral in, I believe, the long-term success of the project. As we're doing that, we're activating public relations and marketing strategies right from the beginning. These are processes that a lot of the developers don't really think about until a little bit further down the road. And what we're saying is that we've come up with this idea that I shared with you called the unified creative vision, where what we share with them is, look, it's so important that we bring all of the major stakeholders that they feel they're going to bring onto the project, or we also introduce stakeholders that can come help realize the vision of the project. We share with them that it's so important to tell that story from day one. It's so key and vital to the success of the project to have all the stakeholders bought into a vision, understanding the vision and what it could be from the beginning, and most importantly, contributing from the get-go as to what this project can look like and how it can impact the built environment in the future. So this entire process, Ayman, it's very different than what developers are used to. It's definitely goes against the grain, but you know what? Everything that I've personally done in my life has always been against the grain. So this is very natural to me. And talking with traditional thinkers is something I've dealt with for my entire life almost. So talking with these decision makers to realize that there's a whole new way that's developing that they need to start thinking about is something that we're doing all the time. And that's really what I'm very excited about, that our industry is changing, and it's changing more rapidly day by day. And now seeing these developers be open to a whole new way of developing their projects really has me excited about what the future of what our neighborhoods, communities, and cities can look like.
When you think about the elements of innovation that are really piquing people's interest from a consumer level or from that small business, if it's a retail space or otherwise, what are some of those things that come to mind?
I think the biggest story right now is all about the experience. And you'll hear it time and time again. Some people are getting sick of it, but I say you're probably getting sick of it because you're not doing it the right way. And when I look at these different activations of retail spaces, and what we're talking to developers about is that they really need to dive in and understand not only what it is specific retailers do and what may be working for them in other malls or other built environments where they've worked with a particular retailer, but they need to take it to the next level and kind of go very community specific and go very local. It's kind of taking that whole local approach of the mom and pop and integrating it with, let's say, your national retailers. Like, how do we integrate that big box type experience in the sense where you have a sophisticated concept, but really bring in that mom and pop feel? And that's a world in which we're discussing on almost a day-to-day basis with clientele, because it's not something that you can scale across the country very easily or quickly. It takes a lot of understanding of nuances, and it takes, frankly, a lot of resources, because you have to have your people spend the time and effort and travel and really spend time and engage with the community. And it reminds me of what developers do when they're trying to get approvals for getting their projects built in certain communities. They have to engage with the local community. They hire a team of lawyers to really figure out what the community wants. It's kind of taking that entire approach and translating it into the brand and marketing strategy for the specific development. So frankly, Ayman, majority of the developers I've spoken with today don't want to do it. And they don't want to do it because it results in them having to change their processes. And I can tell you, these developers, by the year 2030, if not sooner, are going to have major issues. And they really need to start thinking about these ideas, these comments, these concepts, these processes, and really figuring out how can they take a more hands-on approach to really benefit the local community in which they're building.
I really like the way you express that, because it talks about a lot of important elements to business, but also sustainable long-term growth for a business. And it's absolutely right. When you think about the elements of real estate and how it's changing because of what's going on with the pandemic and how technology is playing a role, what are some either viewpoints that you hold that are unique, or what angles or ideas do you think are going to be really important as we continue to adopt more technology in this space?
A couple ideas come to mind. The biggest one is remote work. And a lot of the clients and developers I talk with, they're of the mindset, no, people are coming back to the office. It's not going to change. It's going to go back to the way it was before the pandemic. It's not. Yes, for sure, people are going to go back to the office. It already is happening in major metropolitan cities and more across the country. But I look at this more from a holistic perspective of people have gotten a taste for life and have experienced certain aspects of life that they did not prior to the pandemic. I mean, I can't tell you how many colleagues I've spoken with that have told me that they've finally been able to share special moments with their kids that they had no shot of sharing prior to the pandemic. So many colleagues I've spoken with have also shared they have developed a newfound richness in the appreciation for their spouses. I mean, Ivan, look, this is like, we have this, I'm looking at the silver lining here, okay? We have achieved in this pandemic what it takes years and years of therapy, couples counseling to achieve, for spouses to have a newfound appreciation of one another after years of marriage. I mean, this is unbelievably eye-opening. And what this is resulting in is a completely new way of looking at the way you can run your day-to-day life. In general, what I'm seeing is colleagues are trying, and this is a big negotiation, especially the bigger the office, trying to take Mondays and Fridays at home. And that in and of itself is a massive change. And in looking at this, what I share with clients is that, look, we really need to even look at how we'll be designing office buildings and thinking about what happens all of a sudden in 5 years if 50% of your offices close or realize that hybrid is the way to go. We've only been down this road 2 years. That is not a long time. And right now we're in a very, very friction-oriented stage of companies and employees trying to figure out what's the right way to do this. So we still have time here before the results are out. And even when the results are out, I can guarantee you they're going to continue to evolve because employees have realized they have a bigger voice, they can speak up more, and they can ask for more. And I think overall what we're going to see when this is all, I don't think it'll be said and done, but we have some kind of result here, is that the focus will be on a better quality life. And what I mean by that is that those that understand we need to look at this from a holistic standpoint of how is it that employees are being impacted, not only in their working lives, but how is it that we can enhance their personal lives as well? And this is certainly being done, but I think this has all been accelerated now. That's the biggest thing that comes to mind. The second biggest topic that comes to mind is transport. And it's kind of tied into this idea of remote work in the sense, and this is a large topic. I won't go too into the weeds here, but looking at the different types of solutions now that are out there. And the biggest one that I'm most excited about because of my Jetsons obsession is flying cars. And thinking about the ways in the future that different types of stakeholders will be commuting to particular developments that we're working on with our clients, looking at the idea that people may not even have to commute. Maybe they'll select the option of living 5 minutes away because the project that we're working on has the live component of the live, work, play. So they don't have to commute. Their commute is a 5-minute walk. Looking at those two major components, and then also realizing in the urban driven projects that we're in discussion on, there are close to, this is a mind boggling stat, and maybe a little off here, but approximately 750 million parking spaces in the country today. If you drive around this country, I guarantee that you will come back with the opinion of there's too much parking. Too much underused parking. That for me is a big opportunity in and of itself, where developers can start looking at underutilized projects or properties that they have today, and then figuring out from the larger context of where that particular project fits in the overall story of the city. And then figuring out, is this really the highest and best use of our particular property? So what I believe is that this newfound awareness that is now growing day by day within the development community is going to result in projects in the latter half of this decade that really are focused on the human experience. One thing we always talk about with our clients is you have to look at how is it that your project is enhancing the human experience. You have to focus on the bottom line. I understand profit is important, but you must focus on purpose. As a developer, I feel it's the responsibility of the development community to look at how is it that their project is bettering the planet. We've started with LEED. We've started with different items and processes focused around wellness. And I believe the next focus is humanity. How is it that our projects are bettering humanity and thinking about the ways that we can help the planet move forward?
Amit, it's been a pleasure speaking with you and hearing your expertise and your thoughts. If we switch gears for a little bit and you had the chance to go back in time and meet anyone at any point in history, who comes to mind, or who first comes to mind?
There was a great teacher that I've studied with, unfortunately not in person. His name is Osho. Amazing spiritual teacher, way, way, way ahead of his time, and would have loved to share a meal with him.
Until we speak again, maybe you can share a parting thought for now.
There are three big ideas that I'm very passionate about for this decade ahead. Very, very large ideas. Don't have time to unpack it today, but I'm going to leave you with the three buzzwords. Number one is humanity. I would encourage the development community out there to start thinking about what is it that they're doing and what is it that their projects are bringing to the table to help to create a better sense of humanity on the planet. Number two is integration. How is it that the development community is integrating some of the fantastic systems that have been developed today, such as CSR, ESG, DEI, just to name a few? How is it that they're integrating some of those philosophies and practices into the projects that they're creating? And the last thing that I ask the developers and the investors out there to start thinking about is consciousness. By thinking about these two components that I shared, humanity and integration, I think what will be done is we'll be increasing the consciousness that we have in the built environment. And by doing so, I think what overall we'll be doing is really helping to enhance the human experience on this planet, which is what I feel we in the real estate industry need to be focused on this decade ahead.
Well, Amit, once again, it's been a pleasure. But until we speak again, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ayman. It was great to connect.
Thanks for attending the Business Podcast, and stay tuned for more episodes.